The desert wind carried sand and the smell of fear through the small prison camp. It was November 1943, and the war in North Africa was changing fast. Maria Rossini pressed her face against the wooden wall of the barracks, trying to catch any sound from outside. She was 24 years old, but felt like she had lived 100 years in the past 6 months. Maria remembered the day everything changed. It was September 8, 1943, when Italy surrendered to the Allied forces. She had been working as a nurse in a field hospital near Tripoli, helping wounded Italian soldiers. Everyone thought the surrender meant freedom, meant going home to Florence. They were wrong. The German forces, who had been Italy's allies, turned against them overnight. They called it betrayal. Italian soldiers became prisoners. Italian nurses became something worse. The Germans had retreated from many positions in North Africa after the Allies won major battles at El Alamein and Tunisia earlier that year. But in their retreat, they took prisoners. They took supplies. They took women. Maria and 17 other Italian women were captured when the Germans raided their hospital. They were told they would be used to serve the German officers. Maria understood what that meant immediately. Her heart broke that day. In the barracks with Maria were women from different parts of Italy. There was Lucia, a teacher from Rome, who never stopped crying the first week. There was Sofia, a farmer's daughter from Sicily who still had bruises on her face. There was Elena, who had been engaged to be married before the war destroyed everything. They all shared the same nightmare now. Every evening, German officers would come. Every evening, the women would pray it would end. But it never did. The camp was small, hidden behind sand dunes and rocks. The Germans kept it secret from their own command. This was not official military business. This was the dark side of war that nobody talked about. There were maybe 30 German soldiers stationed here, far from the main battle lines. They had deserted their posts, creating their own little kingdom of horror in the desert. Maria had learned to survive by becoming invisible. She kept her eyes down, spoke only when spoken to, and tried to protect the younger women when possible. She had hidden a small wooden cross that her mother gave her before she left Florence. It was sewn into the hem of her dress. Every night, she would touch it and remember there was once a world where people were kind, where men respected women, where life had meaning beyond survival. The war news filtered through slowly. The guards sometimes talked loud enough for the women to hear. The Americans and British had landed in Sicily in July. They were pushing north through Italy. The Italian king had arrested Mussolini. Everything was chaos. The guards seemed nervous, like they knew their time was running short. But nervous men were dangerous men. Maria worried what they might do when the end came close. On this particular November night, something felt different. The guards had been drinking more than usual. They argued among themselves in harsh German words Maria did not fully understand. She heard the name Rommel mentioned several times. Field Marshal Rommel had been the commander of German forces in Africa, but he had been recalled to Europe months ago. His Africa Corps had been defeated. Now the Germans in North Africa were scattered, disorganized, and desperate. Around midnight, the women heard something new. It was a distant sound like thunder, but there were no clouds in the desert sky. Maria pressed her ear to the wall again. The sound came in waves, boom, 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 artillery fire. It was far away, maybe 20 or 30 kilometers, but it was getting closer. The Americans were advancing. The German guards began shouting. Maria heard vehicles starting, equipment being thrown into trucks. There was panic in their voices. Through a crack in the wooden wall, she saw guards running back and forth, loading boxes and weapons. The senior officer was screaming orders that nobody seemed to follow properly. This was not an organized military retreat. This was chaos. Within 2 hours, the camp was nearly empty. The guards had fled into the night, heading west toward Tunisia, where some German forces still held positions. They had locked the barracks from outside and left. No food, no water, no explanation, just the sound of trucks disappearing into the desert darkness. The women sat in silence for a long time. Finally, Sofia spoke. "Are we free?" she asked in Italian. Nobody answered because nobody knew. The door was still locked. They were still prisoners, but the guards were gone. Maria felt something she had not felt in months, something dangerous to feel because it could be crushed so easily. She felt hope. As dawn broke over the desert, the distant artillery sounds continued. They were definitely closer now. Maria gathered the women together in the center of the barracks. "Listen," she said quietly. "Someone is coming. Maybe Americans, maybe British, maybe more Germans." She paused, seeing the fear in every face. "We must be ready. We must be strong. Whatever happens next, we face it together." The women held hands in a circle. Most of them prayed, some cried, all of them waited. The sun rose higher, burning away the cool desert night. The sound of artillery grew louder with each passing hour. Then around mid-morning they heard a new sound. Different engines, different voices, speaking English. Maria's heart pounded. She remembered the propaganda the Germans had told them. "All soldiers are the same," they had said. "The Americans will treat you no better than we do." She wanted to believe it was a lie, but after everything she had experienced, trust felt impossible. The wooden cross hidden in her dress hem pressed against her leg. She touched it through the fabric and whispered a prayer to a God she was no longer sure was listening. Sergeant James Cooper had seen many things in the North African campaign, but nothing prepared him for what he found that November morning. His unit, part of the United States 3rd Infantry Division, had been pushing westward through Libya, clearing out remaining German positions after the decisive Allied victories earlier in the year. The Battle of Tunisia had ended in May 1943 with over 250,000 Axis prisoners taken. Now it was November, and they were mopping up scattered enemy units that had not surrendered. Cooper was 26 years old, from a small town in Ohio called Mansfield. Before the war, he had worked in his father's hardware store and played baseball on weekends. Now he led a squad of 12 men through the North African desert, hunting for German holdouts. He carried photos of his wife, Margaret, and their 2-year-old daughter, Sarah, in his breast pocket. Looking at those photos reminded him why he was here, what he was fighting for. His squad had been following tire tracks in the sand when they spotted the camp. It was hidden in a small valley between rock formations, barely visible. There were no flags, no identification markers. This was strange because military camps always had some kind of identification. Cooper signaled his men to approach carefully. It might be a trap. The Germans were known for leaving booby traps in abandoned positions. As they got closer, Cooper noticed the camp seemed deserted. Vehicle tracks led away to the west, probably from the night before. There were empty supply crates scattered around, abandoned equipment, and one building that looked like a barracks. That is when he heard it, a woman's voice speaking in Italian, coming from inside the locked barracks. Cooper froze. Women, here? In a German military camp in the middle of nowhere? Nothing about this made sense. He approached the barracks door carefully. It was locked with a heavy chain and padlock from the outside. Through gaps in the wooden walls, he could see movement inside. He called out in English, "Hello? Is anyone in there? We are American soldiers. You are safe now." There was silence at first, then frantic whispers in Italian. Cooper did not speak Italian, but he recognized fear when he heard it. Private Rodriguez, one of his men who spoke some Spanish and could understand a bit of Italian, stepped forward. "Sargento, I think they are scared. The women inside, they are prisoners." Rodriguez called out in Spanish, hoping the Italian women might understand some words. After a moment, a woman's voice responded in broken English. "Please, no hurt. We cannot more." Cooper felt his blood run cold. He suddenly understood what kind of camp this was. The Germans had been running some kind of prisoner camp, and these women had been held here. He had heard rumors of such things but had never encountered it directly. The United States Army had strict codes of conduct, and the treatment of prisoners was taken seriously. What the Germans had done here was a war crime. He immediately called for his medic, Corporal Sam Johnson, and sent another soldier running back to their command post to request a female nurse or WWII officer. The Women's Army Corps had nurses stationed with the medical units about 10 kilometers back. In the meantime, Cooper knew he had to get these women out of the locked barracks, but he had to do it carefully. They were clearly traumatized. He spoke loudly and clearly toward the door. "My name is Sergeant James Cooper. United States Army, we are going to break this lock and get you out. We have a medic here. We will not hurt you. You have my word as an American soldier." He paused, then added, "Rodriguez, translate that into Spanish and hope they understand." Rodriguez did his best. There was a long silence from inside, then the same woman's voice responded in English. You Americans, truth?" Cooper replied firmly, "Yes, ma'am, Americans, 3rd Infantry Division. We just want to help you." Cooper used his bolt cutters to break the chain. The padlock fell to the sand with a heavy thud. He slowly pushed the door open but did not enter. What he saw inside broke his heart. 18 women, all in torn and dirty clothes, all malnourished and terrified, all backing into the far corner of the room as if expecting violence. Some were crying. Others stared with empty eyes that had seen too much horror. Cooper kept his hands visible and empty. He took 2 steps back from the door, giving them space. "Johnson, stay here at the door but don't enter. The rest of you men fall back 20 meters. Give these ladies some space." His soldiers obeyed immediately. Cooper had trained them well, and they understood the situation required sensitivity. One woman stepped forward from the group. She had dark hair pulled back, hollow cheeks, but something in her eyes showed strength that had not been completely broken. She spoke in careful English. "I am Maria, nurse before." She gestured to the other women. "We are prisoners, German soldiers." She could not finish the sentence, but she did not need to. Cooper understood completely. Cooper removed his helmet respectfully. "Miss Maria, I am very sorry for what has happened to you and these ladies. That's over now. Those German soldiers are gone. You are under the protection of the United States Army now. Nobody will hurt you. Nobody will touch you. You have my word." Maria looked at him with eyes that wanted to believe but could not. She had heard promises before. They always turned to lies. "You take your turn now?" she asked quietly, her voice breaking. "We know how this works. All soldiers same." The question hit Cooper like a physical blow. He felt anger rise in him, not at Maria, but at what had been done to her to make her think such things. He spoke slowly and clearly. "No, ma'am, no, that is not how American soldiers behave. We have laws. We have honor. You are a human being. You deserve respect. You deserve safety. That is what you will get." Maria searched his face for lies and found none. But still she could not trust. Trust was a luxury that had been beaten out of her over 6 months of hell. Cooper understood this. He did not push. He simply stood there, hands visible, making no sudden moves, showing through his actions that his words were true. Behind Maria, the other women whispered among themselves in Italian. Some were crying harder now, not from fear but from something else. Maybe relief. Maybe disbelief. Maybe both. The next 7 days changed everything Maria thought she knew about soldiers and men and war. The Americans had moved quickly once they understood the situation. Within 3 hours of finding the women, a medical team arrived with 2 Army nurses, Lieutenant Barbara Hayes from Pennsylvania and Lieutenant Dorothy Chen from California. They were part of the Army Nurse Corps, women who had volunteered to serve in the war zones to help save lives. The female nurses took charge immediately. They set up a separate medical tent just for the Italian women, away from the main camp. They brought clean water, soap, fresh clothes, and medical supplies. Lieutenant Hayes spoke gently in English while Lieutenant Chen, who had studied some Italian at university, tried her best to communicate in their language. The women were examined, their wounds treated, their malnutrition addressed with careful feeding plans. Throughout it all, not a single male soldier entered their area without explicit permission and female supervision. Maria watched all of this with suspicious eyes. She kept waiting for the mask to drop, for the real intentions to show. In her experience, men who wanted to abuse women did not do it immediately. They built trust first, made promises, showed kindness. Then they took what they wanted. So she watched and waited for the betrayal that must surely come. But it did not come. The American camp operated with strict discipline. Sergeant Cooper had posted written orders that Maria saw through the tent flaps. They were in English, but Lieutenant Chen translated them for her. Any soldier who entered the women's area without authorization would face court-martial. Any soldier who spoke to the women without respect would face punishment. Any soldier who made the women uncomfortable in any way should be reported immediately. These were not suggestions. These were military orders carrying the weight of American military law. The Uniform Code of Military Justice was something the Americans took seriously. Cooper explained to Maria through Lieutenant Chen that American soldiers could be dishonorably discharged, imprisoned, or even executed for serious crimes like assault against civilians or prisoners. The United States had signed the Geneva Conventions regarding treatment of prisoners of war. Even though these women were not exactly prisoners of war in the technical sense, the Americans treated them with the same protections and respect. Maria began to see this in action. One afternoon, Private Danny Martinez from Texas approached the women's tent. He was young, maybe 19, with kind eyes and a shy smile. He knocked on the tent post from outside and called out, "Excuse me, ma'am? I have some extra rations here. Chocolate bars. My mom sent them. I thought maybe the ladies might like them." He set a small box down outside the tent and walked away before anyone could even respond. No request for gratitude, no expectation of anything in return. Just simple kindness. This happened again and again. Soldiers would leave small gifts outside the tent: a hairbrush, a bar of nice soap, a pair of clean socks, a handful of wildflowers someone found growing near a water source, always left anonymously or with quick, respectful greetings. Never any pressure, never any expectation. Maria found this harder to understand than the cruelty had been. Cruelty made sense in war. Kindness felt like a trick. After 4 days, Maria began helping in the main medical tent. She was a trained nurse, and there were wounded soldiers who needed care. Lieutenant Hayes welcomed her assistance gratefully. Maria found herself working alongside American medics, treating men who had been injured clearing minefields or in small skirmishes with remaining German units. The work felt good. It reminded her of who she had been before the nightmare began. One of the soldiers she treated was Corporal Willie Jackson from Georgia, who had stepped on a piece of shrapnel. As Maria cleaned and bandaged his foot, he talked to her about his family back home. He showed her a photo of his mother and 3 sisters. "My mama raised me to respect women," he said simply. "She'd tan my hide if I ever did otherwise. These army rules about treating people, right? My mama taught me those before any army did." Through these interactions, Maria began to understand something important. The American military did have strict rules, yes. Soldiers could be punished for misconduct, yes. But more than that, many of these men had been raised with values that made them decent human beings even without the threat of punishment. They had mothers and sisters and wives and daughters they loved and respected. They saw women as people, not objects. This was driven home powerfully 1 week after the liberation. The Americans had captured a group of German soldiers retreating through the area. Among them was an officer Maria recognized immediately. His face appeared in her nightmares. He was one of the men who had commanded the camp where she had been held. When he was brought through the American camp in handcuffs, Maria saw him. Her body reacted before her mind could think. She felt her heart racing, her hands shaking, her breath coming fast. She took a step toward him without even realizing it. Sergeant Cooper, who happened to be nearby, immediately understood. He stepped between Maria and the German officer, not roughly but firmly. "Ma'am," he said quietly, "I know. I understand. But this is not the way." Maria felt tears burning her eyes. He was there. He did." She could not finish. Cooper nodded. "I know. And he will face justice for it. Military justice. The right way. We are documenting everything. We have your testimony and the testimony of the other ladies. When this war is over, there will be trials. War crimes trials. Men like him will answer for what they did." The German officer sneered at Maria and said something cruel in German. Cooper's face hardened. He turned to the guards. "Get him out of here now, and he gets minimum rations until he's transferred to the prisoner camp. Make sure that's documented." Then he turned back to Maria, his voice gentle again. "You never have to see him again, ma'am. I promise you that." That night, Maria sat with the other women in their tent. Sophia asked her what she was thinking. Maria replied slowly, choosing her English words carefully. "I am thinking that maybe not all men are the same. Maybe not all soldiers are the same. These Americans, they have power over us. They could do anything, but they choose to do what is right instead." She paused, touching the wooden cross hidden in her dress. "Maybe my prayers were heard after all." Lieutenant Chen, who was nearby checking supplies, overheard this. She smiled sadly and said in her careful Italian, "We are not perfect. America is not perfect, but we try to be better. We try to do right." Maria nodded slowly. For the first time in 6 months, she felt something she thought she had lost forever. She felt her humanity being restored piece by small piece. 3 weeks had passed since the liberation, and the temporary camp had become something unexpected. It had become a place of healing. The war continued around them, with the Allied forces pushing through Italy itself now. In September, the Americans and British had landed at Salerno and Anzio. By November, they were fighting their way toward Rome against fierce German resistance. The Italian campaign was proving to be harder than anyone had expected, with the Germans defending every mountain and every river crossing. But in this small corner of North Africa, a different kind of battle was being won. It was the battle to reclaim dignity and trust and hope. Maria had started teaching basic Italian to some of the American soldiers who were interested. In return, she learned more English. Sergeant Cooper had suggested this as a way to keep everyone occupied and build bridges of understanding. It worked better than anyone expected. Private Martinez was one of her best students. He had a natural gift for languages and worked hard at learning. During one lesson, he told Maria about his grandmother in Texas who spoke Spanish at home. "Language is about respect," he said in his simple way. "Learning someone's language says you think they are worth the effort." Maria had never thought about it that way before, but she realized he was right. The women had also started receiving letters through the military mail system. Sergeant Cooper's wife, Margaret, had written to Maria after Cooper told her about the situation in one of his letters home. Margaret's letter was warm and full of compassion. She wrote about her life in Ohio, about their daughter Sarah, about how she was praying for Maria and the other women every night. She sent a small package with soap that smelled like lavender, hair ribbons, and a small book of poetry. Maria was moved to tears by this kindness from a woman she had never met, who lived on the other side of the world. She wrote back, struggling with her English but determined to try. Through Lieutenant Chen's help, she thanked Margaret for her kindness and told her a little about Florence, about the beautiful cathedral there, about her own mother who she had not heard from since the war began and prayed was still alive. This correspondence became a lifeline for Maria. Each letter from Margaret reminded her that there was a normal world somewhere, a world where people were kind to strangers, where women supported each other, where life was about more than just survival. Other soldiers' wives began writing to the other Italian women too, creating a network of compassion that stretched across the Atlantic Ocean. The healing was not just emotional. The women were gaining weight, their physical wounds were healing, and color was returning to their faces. Lieutenant Hayes remarked that Maria looked 10 years younger than when they had found her. But there were still hard moments, still flashbacks and nightmares. One evening, a young soldier accidentally entered the women's tent without knocking first. He was looking for Lieutenant Chen to ask a medical question and simply forgot the protocol in his urgency. The reaction was immediate and intense. The women panicked. Sophia screamed. Elena curled into a corner. Maria's heart started racing so fast she thought she might faint. The young soldier, realizing his mistake, backed out immediately with his hands up, stammering apologies. But the damage was done. The women were shaking, crying, transported back to their trauma in an instant. Sergeant Cooper responded swiftly. He assembled his entire unit within 10 minutes. With the women's permission, he had Lieutenant Chen translate as he spoke. "What happened tonight was unacceptable," he said firmly. "Private Richardson made a mistake. It was not intentional, but intentions don't matter when people are hurt. We are implementing new protocols immediately. 2 knocks and wait for permission before approaching within 20 feet of the women's area. No exceptions. Not for emergencies. Not for anything." Private Richardson stood before the assembled soldiers, his face red with shame. Cooper made him apologize publicly, not to humiliate him, but to show the women that their safety mattered more than convenience or pride. Richardson did so sincerely, his voice cracking with emotion. "I am so sorry, ma'am. All of you. I wasn't thinking. It won't happen again. You have my word." Maria appreciated this response more than the apology itself. The fact that the Americans took the incident seriously, that they changed their procedures because of it, that they held their own accountable, showed her something important. This was not just talk. This was a system that actually worked. As December approached, word came down that arrangements were being made to send the women back to Italy through Red Cross channels. The Allied forces had liberated much of southern Italy by now, and it was safe for the women to return home. Maria felt conflicted about this news. She wanted to go home desperately to find her mother, to see Florence again. But she also felt strange gratitude toward these American soldiers who had shown her that humanity could survive even in war. She discussed this with the other women one evening. They all felt the same mixture of emotions. Elena said, "I want to go home, but I also want to remember this. I want to remember that after the worst things happened, good things happened too. That men can be good." Lucia added, "I want to tell people about this. I want Italy to know that not all armies are the same." The women decided to do something to thank the Americans before they left. With Lieutenant Chen's help, they planned a small dinner. They requested ingredients through the supply system and prepared Italian food with American Army rations. It was not fancy, but it was made with care. They invited Sergeant Cooper and his key squad members along with the nurses who had cared for them. The dinner took place in the mess tent on a cool December evening. The women had decorated with whatever they could find: wildflowers, colored paper from supply boxes, anything to make it feel special. Private Martinez had brought his harmonica and played soft music. The atmosphere was warm despite the cool desert night. During the dinner, Maria stood to speak. Her English had improved dramatically over the past weeks. "Sergeant Cooper, all soldiers, nurses, we want to say thank you. When you found us, we were broken. We did not believe in good anymore. We thought all men were the same, all soldiers were the same. You showed us different. You showed us that power can be used for good, that strength can protect instead of hurt, that men can be kind." She paused, her voice catching with emotion. "In Italian, we say gratitudine. It means more than thank you. It means the feeling stays in the heart forever. We have gratitude for you. We will carry this forever. We will tell our families, our children, our grandchildren. We will say that in the darkness there was light. The light was you." Several of the soldiers had tears in their eyes. Sergeant Cooper stood and replied, "Ma'am, you don't need to thank us. You deserve to be treated as human beings from the start. We just did what was right." But Maria shook her head firmly. "No. Doing right when it is hard, when nobody is watching, when there is no reward, that is special. That is hero." That night marked a turning point for all of them. The Americans realized the impact their actions had, how much their adherence to honor and discipline meant. The Italian women realized that their faith in humanity, though badly damaged, had not been destroyed. It had been restored by these unlikely saviors in American uniforms. December 1943 brought both endings and beginnings. The Red Cross had finalized arrangements to transport the Italian women back to their homeland. The Allied forces had captured Naples in October and were slowly pushing northward toward Rome. Southern Italy was now relatively safe, and the women could return to search for their families and begin rebuilding their lives. The departure was scheduled for December 18th. The women spent their final days at the camp preparing for the journey home. The Army provided them with proper clothing, travel documents, and small amounts of money to help them restart their lives. Lieutenant Hayes ensured each woman had medical records documenting their condition when found, and the treatment they received. These records would be important for any future legal proceedings against their captors. Maria had written several letters to send ahead to Florence. She did not know if her mother was still alive, if her home still stood. The war had damaged so much of Italy, but she wrote anyway to neighbors, to old friends from the hospital where she had worked, to anyone who might help her find her family. Hope was a fragile thing, but she held on to it carefully. On the evening before departure, Sergeant Cooper asked to speak with Maria privately. They sat outside the women's tent with Lieutenant Chen present as a chaperone and translator if needed. Cooper pulled out a small package wrapped in brown paper. "This is from my wife, Margaret," he explained. "She wanted you to have this." Maria unwrapped it carefully. Inside was a beautiful silver cross on a chain, much finer than the wooden one her mother had given her. There was also a letter from Margaret. Lieutenant Chen helped Maria read it. The letter said that Margaret knew Maria was a woman of faith, that faith had probably been tested terribly by what happened. The cross was meant to be a symbol that faith was worth keeping, that God worked through good people, and that Maria should never lose hope. Maria cried as she read this. She told Cooper through her tears, "I keep my mother's cross here," and showed him the wooden one sewn into her hem. "I never took it out because I was afraid someone would steal it. It was all I had from before. Now I have two crosses, one from my mother, one from yours." One from my old life, one from my new life. Both remind me that good exists. Cooper smiled gently. Ma'am, I want you to know something. What happened to you was evil, plain and simple evil, but you survived it. You kept your humanity even when people tried to take it from you. That takes a strength most soldiers never have to show. You are one of the strongest people I have ever met. Maria shook her head. I do not feel strong. I feel broken still. Maybe always broken? Cooper replied thoughtfully. Broken things can be mended. They never look the same as before, but sometimes they are stronger in the broken places. You will heal. It will take time, but you will heal. And you will help others heal by telling your story. This conversation stayed with Maria through the night. She could not sleep, thinking about everything that had happened. In 6 months, she had experienced the worst of humanity and some of the best. She had seen what men could do when they abandoned honor, and what they could do when they held on to it. Both lessons were important. Both needed to be remembered. The morning of departure came with clear desert skies. The women gathered their few belongings and prepared to board the trucks that would take them to the coast. From there, they would take a ship to Naples, then travel north to their home regions. The journey would take weeks, but at least they were going home. The American soldiers lined up to see them off, but they kept a respectful distance, not crowding or overwhelming. Many of the men had small gifts, chocolate bars, writing paper, small mementos. They left these in a box by the trucks for the women to take if they wished. No pressure, no expectations, just kindness. Maria approached Sergeant Cooper one last time. She had prepared something to say in English and had practiced with Lieutenant Chen. Sergeant Cooper, I want you to know something. When we were captured, the German soldiers told us that all soldiers are the same, that all men want the same things, that nobody would treat us better. We believed them because we had no reason not to. She paused, making sure she got the words right. You proved them wrong. You and your men. You showed us that some men are different. That honor is real. That kindness is possible even in war. I will never forget this. I will tell everyone I meet. I will make sure the world knows that the American soldiers who found us were good men. Cooper's eyes were wet as he replied, The world is full of good people and bad people, ma'am. War brings out the worst in some and the best in others. We just tried to be the best version of ourselves. That is all any of us can do. He extended his hand for a handshake, and Maria took it firmly. It was the first time she had voluntarily touched a man's hand since her liberation. The fact that she could do so without fear was itself a kind of healing. One by one, the women boarded the trucks. Sophia hugged Lieutenant Hayes. Elena gave Private Martinez a drawing she had made of the camp. Lucia left a prayer card for Cooper's daughter. These small exchanges of gratitude filled the morning with tears and smiles mixed together. As the trucks pulled away, Maria looked back at the camp one last time. She saw the American flag flying above it, saw the soldiers waving goodbye, saw the place where she had learned to trust again. She touched both crosses, her mother's wooden one and Margaret's silver one, and made a silent promise. She would survive, she would heal, she would tell this story. The world needed to know that even in the darkest times, light could be found. The trucks drove north toward the coast, kicking up desert dust behind them. The women were quiet at first, each lost in her own thoughts. Then Sophia began singing an old Italian folk song about going home. One by one, the others joined in. Their voices, weak at first, grew stronger with each verse. They were going home. They were survivors. They were witnesses to both cruelty and kindness, and they would bear witness to both for the rest of their lives. 22 years later, in 1965, Maria sat in her small apartment in Florence with her 2 grandchildren. The war had indeed damaged the city, but it had been rebuilt. She had found her mother alive, though her father had died in the fighting. She had eventually married a kind man, a teacher who understood her trauma and gave her space to heal. They had a daughter, and now that daughter had children of her own. The grandchildren asked about the war as children do. Maria pulled out an old cigar box from her closet. Inside were letters from Margaret Cooper, still tied with ribbon, a faded photograph of Sergeant Cooper and his squad, a small American flag, the silver cross, and underneath everything, still sewn into a piece of fabric, her mother's wooden cross. Let me tell you a story, Maria said in Italian. Her grandchildren gathered close. A story about the darkest time of my life and the light that found me there. She showed them the photograph. These men saved me, but more than that, They showed me that goodness exists even in terrible times. They showed me that honor is real. She pointed to each soldier in the photo, remembering their names even after all these years. Remember this, she told her grandchildren. Character is not what you do when people are watching. Character is what you do when you have power over someone weaker and choose to protect them instead of hurt them. These men had that character. The grandchildren listened with wide eyes as Maria told them the whole story, carefully appropriate for their ages, but honest about the darkness and the light. When she finished, her grandson asked, "Did you ever see Sergeant Cooper again?" Maria shook her head sadly. "No. We wrote letters for some years, but then we lost contact. War scatters people. But I never forgot him. I never forgot any of them." She held up the photograph, the edges worn from years of handling. In it, Maria and the other Italian women stood with the American soldiers, all smiling, standing at respectful distances, dignity preserved in every pose. It was a testament to humanity's capacity for decency, even in war's darkest hours. "This photograph," Maria said softly, "is proof that not all is lost when the worst happens. Sometimes, if we are lucky, we find angels wearing soldiers' uniforms. We find people who remind us that we are human. We find light in the darkness." Her granddaughter touched the photograph gently. "You were very brave, Nonna." Maria smiled sadly. "I was not brave, little one. I was just trying to survive. The brave ones were the men who chose to do right when they could have done wrong. That is true bravery. Remember that always." As the sun set over Florence, Maria returned the cigar box to its place in her closet. The memories it held were bittersweet, but they were also important. They were proof that in the worst circumstances, humanity could still shine through. They were proof that honor was not just a word, but a choice that people could make every day. They were proof that even the deepest wounds could heal, slowly over time, with the help of good people who chose to do right. The war had ended 20 years ago, but its lessons lived on. Maria had kept her promise. She had told her story to anyone who would listen. She had borne witness to both the cruelty and the kindness she experienced. And in doing so, she had kept alive the memory of the American soldiers who showed her that not all men were the same, that not all soldiers were the same, that honor and decency could survive even in the hell of war. This was her gift to them and to the world, the truth remembered and retold, so that future generations might learn from both the darkness and the light.